All right, everyone. So I posted a community page post the other day. Since I have the castle built up, I would like to try to do a game of the Siege of Belgrade, like a kind of battle report, but I thought I would do a little talk about the background. This is, of course, the Ottoman Siege of Belgrade in July of 1521. One of the what became one of the major victories that sort of unlocked Hungary for the Ottomans that would help them clear the way in 1526. So this battle is interesting because obviously it's a siege. I'd like to use my terrain, but it was not kind of an anticipated victory for the Ottomans. Belgrade had always kind of been a key fort. It sits on the Danube. During the period that we're talking about, it was a walled city that backed into the Danube River. And the Ottomans wanted it to have a river flotilla and a kind of place to resupply, which when they did take it after the siege, it certainly played that role for a long time, a couple centuries. And the city had been besieged before during the period of János Hunyadi or John Hunyadi and Mehmed the Conqueror, but he had managed to defeat the Ottomans in that siege. But by the time you get to Suleiman's reign, there's a lot going on internally in the empire, and they didn't necessarily before kind of Suleiman's time. They had a sort of a rhetorical idea of, we're going to go take what they called the golden apple or the red apple, the Kizil Ilma. This was sometimes Rome, although they don't really try to attack Rome or really Italy. Pretty much after the time of Mehmed the Conqueror, so it's the 15th century. We're talking about almost 100 years later, not quite, 70, 80 years. But it's during Suleiman's reign when mostly the people around Suleiman that would have been his father Selim's advisors kind of give him the idea to launch these grand campaigns in the West, and Belgrade is sort of the first one. Why did they do that? One was Hungary was a fairly rich country in the Middle Ages, although sparsely populated. Very good agricultural land. This whole region is still like that today. And it was a trading area. So you've got over here, you've got the black routes to the Black Sea, and then you've got routes that into Vienna and the rest of Europe. So this was a nice kind of a transit zone. And then of course you've got this sector over here that's a lot of trade goods coming into Croatia, especially the city of Dubrovnik or Ragusa, which I think by the early 16th century was already kind of an Ottoman vassal, similar to Moldavia and Wallachia over here. I'm sorry about the quality of the map. This is taken from a book, and it's originally like a much smaller size, so that's why I made some notes on here to make some of the things clearer. And it's also trying to show like different campaigns earlier if you see the dates. So we're just talking about 1521 here. But the other reason why they launched this campaign is they want to basically get a rest from all these campaigns in the east that Suleiman's father, Selim, had been doing. So Selim is, during his reign, he conquers the Mamluks of Egypt. Now, Egypt is pretty rich, and there's a lot of trade goods there, spices, a lot of grain. This is, of course, with the Nile floods. It's Egypt is a big breadbasket, but kind of more existentially in Salim's mind, he has this competition with the Safavids of Iran, Shah Ismail, who's a Shia Muslim or Shi'i Muslim. The Ottomans are Sunnis, and they have a kind of conflict over who is sort of the Mahdi. This is an idea in Islam of someone who arrives and will inaugurate the end of time. A lot more complicated than that, but anyway, they have this kind of competition over who is that, who may be that, and more prosaically though, these campaigns in the East are very expensive, and there's not a lot of loot. So when you campaign in the Caucasus, or if they do break out into kind of Azerbaijan or Western Iran, there's really not much loot. You are not really supposed to take slaves that are Muslims. This is a big thing as well. Although they do sometimes justify enslaving Shias, although anyway, separate topic. But so the point is, there's a lot of loot that they can get here, both in terms of physical goods, and that's a motivation for a lot of the army, although certainly not all, and fairly common in this period all over the world. This kind of desire for loot. So that's another reason, and basically these advisors that had been under Salim and now under Suleiman say, okay, now we can we want to have an easier campaign or a more worthwhile campaign in our minds. Let's march here and break through this defensive line that had been fairly stable. In the 15th century, they do try to break through with a grand campaign, but they're not really successful. And really, this sort of line would have been more defensible for the empire long term. Now this gets into sort of outside of like gaming stuff, but really what they do when they invade Hungary, this kind of has the seeds of its own destruction into it, because they're never able to get control of this region fully. Unlike in Bosnia, which we'll talk about in a minute, they don't ever have enough kind of either Muslims from Anatolia or southern or Rumelia, so that would be what's not on this map, the Balkans, to settle in up here as they do in Bosnia, and they're never really successful in kind of converting the population as they are in Bosnia and in parts further south. So this just becomes a big cauldron of warfare. Waxes and wanes over until about the early 18th century, but this has serious effects of, they can't collect revenue consistently. You have these kind of locals taking local kind of commanders that take things into their own hands. I made videos about this stuff before, but this would have been more defensible. But the problem for the Ottomans and also for the Hungarians, the Kingdom of Hungary, is you've got these kind of raiders that are just always moving into Slavonia and southern Hungary, and that eats away at the defenses of the kingdom. The kingdom has sort of pretty fundamental constitutional problems, unfortunately. The nobility are never really under control of the king fully. He has to the kings of Hungary have to always kind of wheel and deal to get everybody on the same page, which is very difficult. I mean, the Ottoman sultans also have to do that, but when you have kind of titled nobility as you do in Western Europe, that confers a greater degree of kind of independence in the kingdom, whereas in the Ottoman Empire, if your position is revoked as the Pasha of Sarajevo, for example, you're done. Like, it's not like, oh well, my son is going to be the pasha necessarily. The government can just appoint someone new. So they, unfortunately for the kings of Hungary, they can't quite do that. And it's also expensive. The kings of Hungary always have problems getting money, so that's another factor in this campaign. And what happens during the campaign? This is fine. Okay, now we're finally kind of getting to the point. So they initially, the Ottomans' main force, they initially want to attack here. So this town of Shabak or Sabak. This is in Serbia today. And Suleiman goes here with the rest of the force, but he's pretty young. I think he's like 20 or 21. His commander, one of his commanders, instead does not follow the Sultan, which is pretty shocking. He goes to Belgrade, and they besiege Belgrade. Now, Belgrade needed, or one advantage Belgrade had for the Hungarians was they, in the 15th century, so about 70 years before, they had an effective river flotilla to help push the Ottomans back. And the river flotilla, at this time, the Hungarians did not have a good river flotilla. They had problems getting gunpowder during this campaign at various positions. And you had, just not a very good showing of, military skill from the Hungarians, unfortunately. But the Ottomans did bring a very sizable river flotilla that would support them. And they sailed that up the river and, to move on to Belgrade. And the thing that made Belgrade unexpected is this fort over here, Sabac, falls very quickly, and then that allows the rest of the army to move back into Belgrade. The other preparation the Ottomans made was they had dispatched the forces in Bosnia into the Croatian Slavonia to raid. So that would have, forced the Hungarians to send troops, or at least have the border captains, be on alert so they couldn't go support either Sabac or Belgrade. And they also sent troops from Moldavia and Wallachia into Transylvania. So they were pretty smart, the Ottomans, at, kind of trying to harass these two sectors and then push into southern Hungary over here. Okay, now we're finally at the part of talking about how to war game this, what I'm planning to do. So my plan for the scenario is I will include Sabac as a component of the game. Now, the main siege will start with Belgrade with a smaller Ottoman force under the command of Piri Mehmed Pasha. And the rest of the army will be at Sabac, off the table. Then what I will do is I will probably abstract the Siege of Sabac, where just rolling to represent will this fort fall, and will those reserves arrive to Belgrade. Now, obviously, because I'm going to be playing this across like a multi-turn war game, the time is going to be compressed. So the siege lasts some, let me look at the time. It's a few weeks, I believe. Anyway, but the point is I will be compressing the time, obviously, to make this like a playable game. Now, the other thing I may also do in terms of the videos is what I might do is play out some smaller engagements that would represent attacks from Bosnia, and perhaps doing some of the attacks into Transylvania from the Ottoman side. And based on the results of those battles, maybe giving the forces at Belgrade more troops, or even at Sabach, like making it harder for the Ottomans to make the fortress fall and then move back here to add a kind of what if element. And as far as troops and miniatures go, I'm away from my main kind of collection, so I don't have all my figures to kind of look through them. But what my plan is I mean, I'm probably just going to have the stands that are defending Belgrade, the musketeers, which I think I do have enough of finally, of like early 16th century musketeers. I could use some of the Hungarian type Hajduk type musketeers, but they would be a bit anachronistic, I think, in terms of their clothes. And I do kind of care about that stuff, so I may not be able to use those. Anyway, what I may do is, based on the number of troops or the results of these other engagements, I might give the defenders of Belgrade more troops, and instead of having kind of the stands of musketeers on the fortress and on the walls represent like literal units, or do casualty removal, what I might do is add hit points to each wall section that would include the musketeers posted on them. So what do I mean? Maybe I'll just flip to the other side of this and draw a little quick like diagram. So my idea is that, so my fortress has, walls sections like this. Just going to do a quick drawing. And they're divided with, kind of different, there's seams in them. So, and then I'll have the stands like that of troops. But what I think I'll do is I'm just going to have the wall section and the troops on them count as one unit, because the artillery at this time was quite good. It's much better than is often represented in war games for this period. But if the fortifications were strong enough, they could deflect artillery. Now, I will have to do some more reading about the condition of the walls at Belgrade to see how I should handle this. But my idea is that, each time there's a sort of direct hit by artillery or a assault by troops, by infantry moving up, I will, deduct hit points when enough hit points are, when the wall section loses enough hit points and it drops to 0, I'll then say, okay, I'll put like some kind of like flame token or smoke and say, that this section of wall can no longer be defended, something like that. So I think that's how I'll handle like the actual siege operations and experiment with that. This, I think that's all I have. This is sort of long-winded, but maybe you learned something. And I just wanted to do a video to kind of do a little prep work of what I want to do. And I could abstract some of these out, just do like some, I don't know, like dice rolling to decide like what the results of these engagements in Transylvania and in the border with Bosnia are, and see, who gets, if the Hungarians are able to push some of these back and then allocate more troops to the main action in Belgrade. Excuse me. So that's my idea. The only thing in terms of miniatures that I'm not sure I have enough of are like early 16th century cavalry. I don't really have any gendarmes, proper gendarmes that, like you would find in the Italian wars, but I don't know how many of those were at the Siege of Belgrade. I'm reading, having to reread the main book for this sort of period that I got this map from, which is titled From Nicopolis to Mohacs. So I'll have to read up more on that if there's information about that. But that's my idea. And it was also helped me test out my plans for doing siege warfare. So that's all I have. Thanks for watching, and I'm hoping to do this in a couple more weeks when I can get it onto the table and make a 15-20 minute battle report and see how it goes. Okay, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.